What's up, class? Professor Calderon here. Week 2, the rise of Hollywood. And I just got a couple, not too much, just like 7 notes I want to share with you guys. All right, the first thing, let's talk about the MPPC, Motion Picture Patent Company. And this was a 10 leading U.S. groups of producers and manufacturers of cameras and projectors. And what they did was they came in and tried to basically control and monopolize the market in cinema. They controlled the prices for projections and cameras. Later on, they were declared illegal. But during this period, while they were trying to control the market, something started to happen. They were making it so difficult to get a project done on the East Coast, where most of the big production companies were and where they were located, that around 1910-ish, in West LA, these smaller production houses started popping up. These smaller West LA film companies started popping up. So this was a direct response to the control that the MPPC was doing, the trust, they call it. And they were controlling what type of films were getting made, the productions that were getting made, and whatnot. So aside from the trust, they couldn't hold control of that dominance. It was difficult for them to do. So on the West Coast, in West LA, the smaller film companies started finding other ways to make films, get their films done. And what they started doing in West LA, on the West Coast, becomes the Hollywood studio system. They become so efficient at it. They become so good at it, right? They started figuring out how to shoot money, or how to shoot for less. They develop production methods that cut costs. For example, shooting out of sequence instead of shooting in sequence. Sometimes you can shoot out of sequence and save money on locations. So all these different shortcuts they started fine-tuning and honing in on. And this allowed them to expand on the global market because they started churning out movies, right? Also, what these so-called independent filmmakers did was they started to distinguish their films from films that were made by the trust being the MPPC. The MPPC, they were still relying on short films. But these independent filmmakers on the West Coast, they started going to pulp magazines, fiction, nonfiction books. They were going to books in the Creative Commons and works of literature. They started looking at successful plays, and they started taking those and turning those into movies. Okay, that's what they were doing on the West Coast. So the MPPC, what they did, sort of paved the way for the Hollywood studio system, or it made the crisis, so to speak. And the response to that was the Hollywood studio system, because in West LA, those smaller film production companies, they were doing, put it plain and simple, they were doing more with less. So it forced them to make this system. And within the system itself, it was a vertically integrated a vertically integrated production and system that they made. Okay? So to distinguish themselves, they did a couple more things. They started turning to more complicated narratives, right? Longer narratives, things in the public domain, successful plays. By 1912, they were making enough movies to fill theatrical bills. And there were 20,000 cinemaplexes in the U.S. by 1920, okay? But they were focusing on exhibition in the new palatial style exhibition houses in major cities only, okay? So by 1920, Paramount, Fox, and MGM, they were collecting millions and millions of dollars in profit every year off these films. So now, the independents by 1920, right? We're talking less than a decade. These independent filmmakers become the studio system. Okay. Now they have this thing, this phenomenon that's globally taking fire, and it's the Hollywood glamorous image. And this glamour image that they're selling now, they're marketing this, right? They're putting their marketing machines together to give us this glamour and this glitz that we've never seen before. And this image that they were marketing was huge. It was enormous. It was so huge that they had to take out ads in the newspapers to tell people, aspiring actors and actresses, not to come to Hollywood because the opportunity isn't there. But that just goes to show you how well they were marketing this glamorous image. So let's talk about the production system. In less than 2 decades, Hollywood went from selling small novelty films to a finely tuned machine that's promoting itself. Okay? Hollywood is promoting itself as this glamorous image. One film that exemplified that is D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. By far, yes, it is a very divisive film, but this film did a lot of things, a lot of firsts on many fronts. The way, and not just talking about the aesthetics of the film, that's a whole nother thing. The film was marketed differently. D.W. Griffith made sure that his film premiered in only the best palatial exhibition houses. Instead of 5-cent tickets, he sold his tickets for $2, and which was the price for a theatrical ticket, a theater ticket. You know, it was like the audacity of him. But he made sure for the first time that this film was taken serious. Around this time now, the star is also emerging as this powerful thing to be marketed. The independent films, they are using their stars to distinguish one film from another. So you may have the Fairbanks film or the Chaplin film or you know, the Mary Pickford film. They also started taking these stars on tours. Okay, so let's talk about distribution and control of the market. You can't talk about this without mentioning Zukor or Zucker. Either way, you can't talk about this without mentioning this guy. He pioneered the largest film company in the world. Then this company was so large, it was traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Think about that. So by the mid-1920s, the US films dominated the English-speaking market. I'm talking Canada, UK, Australia. It was also in other markets, but on a limited basis. But all the English-speaking markets was dominated by US films. The reaction to that wasn't all that warm because we were so pervasive that and the thirst that the audiences had for these films were so pervasive that sometimes it was harder for native countries to sell their own native stories. People would much prefer to see the story that was made in the US. So you have this sense of national pride, I guess, that was being hit. So the reaction to this success of Hollywood on the global market, like I said, wasn't all too warm. Other countries started enacting protections against foreign films. They started restricting the number of films that would come into their countries. Back at home, what was going on also was the rise of the movie palace. You had Grumman and Roxy. These guys pioneered the movie palace, and they made it an architectural experience. They would bring in sometimes the hundreds of actors to act out scenes. They wanted to make the theater-going experience in itself something to be talked about, aside from the films being played. And they would construct these palace-like theaters with these illustrious lobbies. And in these lobbies, they would even have areas where they can bring in live orchestras that would entertain folks while they were waiting to be seated for the film. They made sure that there were ushers to seat you as opposed to you seating yourself. So the movie palace had a big play in the dominance at this time. All right. So you guys stay up on the readings. Stay up on the quizzes. The quizzes are only 10%, but those same questions, they come around again for our final. And I hope you've already started on your legacy essay, thinking about who you're going to interview and whatnot. All right. Good luck.